Hello, everybody. Welcome to Chin Fat, where you have everything chin and fat, I guess. I don't know. No. Anyway, this episode I'm going to be going over using transitions, video transitions in Premiere Pro. And this is going to be a very comprehensive, in-depth tutorial on transitions. So if you want a quick, short one, don't watch this, go somewhere else. Yes, I just uninvited you. Anyway, but if you like the comprehensive stuff, stick around. That's what we're doing here. And we're going to go over here. Right now, keep in mind I'm under the regular editing layout. If your editing layout's all weird, you can go up here and hit this and say reset to saved layout. Make sure that's like the default layout. And I'm going to find my effect panel here. I'm going to hit this little double arrow there. If it's not showing here, you can hit this little double arrow, pull down, and there is my effect tab. You can grab this. I'm going to drag it closer to my project window there so I have it a little bit more conveniently located there since I'm going to be working with it. And under that effect tab, you've got these audio or these video transitions here. The next episode I'm going over audio transitions, but this one I'm covering video transitions. We already covered video effects, and this one's transitions. Now, if you're looking for a specific transition and you know what you're looking for, like an awesome page peel, you type in page and it brings it up, and there are your page peels right there. That arrow, it opens the folders that with anything that has to do with that effect or with that transition. The dissolve is the most common one. If you type in dissolve, just start typing dissolve, you'll see these transitions here. You see film dissolve there and cross dissolve. I'm just going to kill that right there. But if you're looking for a specific dissolve or a specific transition, you can just type in the search engine and find it. Otherwise, you can arrow down. If you know where it's located, arrow down again. And here are my dissolves here. Now, you'll notice this cross dissolve here, which is the most commonly used transition between video clips here, has this little outline around it. It has this little thin outline around it. So if I click away from it, now you can see that outline there. That is shortcut related. That is called your default transition because it has this highlight around there. So if you're using a shortcut to add a dissolve, let's show you how to add a cross dissolve just by simply using a shortcut. I'm going to jump to my timeline. It's Shift 3 to jump to my timeline. And I would mention, I would get used to jumping between your edits by using your arrows up and down on your keyboard. That way you can land exactly on your edit and you can perform a transition right on your edit. So if I want to do a transition, so right here I'm hitting arrow up and it's jumping to the left, arrow down, jumping to the right. So say I want to do a transition right here. Usually a cross dissolve will imply a passage of time. If you're just doing straight edits, it doesn't imply like you go from here, cut from there to there. It does not suggest a transition in time. But if you put a dissolve, it does. So let's do this. And that's where the joke comes from. They say if you can't solve it, dissolve it when you're editing. Anyway, so right here on that edit, I've landed on that exact edit by using my arrows up and down. You hit Command D if you're on a Mac, and on a PC, this is Control D, the letter as in dissolve. So if I hit Command D here, it adds a cross dissolve. And this here is going to be a standard is going to be a 1 second cross dissolve here. So if I move my mouse back here and I press play, we've added that cross dissolve there. So now it dissolves over time there. If you want to change change the time of that transition, by the way, you can double click on these transitions here and you'll see that I have a 1 second transition. So 1 second, this is a 24 frame per second. So this is important to know. This is a 24 frame per second timeline. If I go to my timeline here and look at it, this is 23.976, which is essentially 24 frames per second. Now, if you have a 60 frame per second timeline, this would be a 60 frame dissolve, because right now, let's go to the preferences and look at our preferences. I'm going to go under Premiere Pro, and under the PC, you'll find this under Edit, and then you can go down and find the preferences down here under Edit and Preferences. On a Mac, you go to Premiere Pro and go to Preferences, and it's right here in this drop down. And I'm going to go to Timeline. And timeline, you have some different ways of setting your video transition default duration here, and your audio transition as well. But the default for video right now is based on seconds. If you say frames, you can type in an exact amount of frames. 30 frames is going to be a longer than a 1 second transition in my 24 frame per second timeline, because this is not a 30 frame per second timeline. So that would be 6 frames longer. See, if I did that there and hit OK, now when I do a cross dissolve, Command D or Control D, double click on this, it is 1 second and 6 frames, so that's longer. It's now a 30 frame transition. So I'm going to do it by seconds. I'm going to go back and change it. I'm just going to change that back in my preferences here. Change it back to seconds, and then if you want to add it to a 2 second one or a 1.5 second one, you can do that. Another way of changing the duration of your transition is you can double click on it and you can change it here. You can say I want my transition to be 2 seconds. You hit 2, period. The period is a placeholder for 00 frames, and I hit enter, and it just made a 2-second transition. Double click on it, 3 period makes it 3 second, and so on. Now as we play through it, it's more of a very gradual transition there. You can also change the timing. So what is happening here is it's basically at this point here, it is taking this video and starting to turn down the opacity to about this point here. It gradually turns down the opacity from this point to this point of this clip, and it starts bringing up the opacity of this clip from here, and then it's at full opacity right there. So as we play through that, that's what's happening there. Now you can also grab this and you can shift it and tell it where it's going to start. This is still a 2-second transition, but now it's going to start a little later on this clip and end it later on this clip. So like right here, let's watch this. We have that hand right here. Watch this. You see that close-up hand reaching for it, and it doesn't match with this shot there. So if you want to change that, since the hand is coming from this close-up here, I could grab this and shift it this direction, maybe before the hand starts moving. There we go. And now the hand will not come up during that dissolve. Watch this, because I started it earlier. See that? So I changed the timing of the transition, and it changed what happens in that frame, and it looks a little bit more clean there. Now another way of bringing a transition here, you can change your default transition if you want. If you like the film dissolve, or if you want, if you like the page peel as your standard transition, let's do page peel. This is a really cheesy, stupid transition, but I'm going to set it. I'm going to right click on it and set it as my default transition. I'm going to go to my timeline, Shift 3, arrow up to jump left to my endpoint, Command D to add that, and I'm going to play through this. And look at that awesome page peel. That's amazing. That's such a good transition. I love it. So I'm going to delete that. But yeah, I made that my default transition. Now whatever one I add this onto, it's going to add a page peel to it. I like to keep my dissolve as the default transition. Cross dissolve is the most commonly used. So I'm going to set that back to the default transition. Now you'll see that that has the highlight around it. Another way you can transition here, let's grab a wipe here. I'm going to arrow down for the wipes, and I'm going to grab a regular wipe. I'm going to drag, you can drag these and just simply drop them onto your transition, onto your edits there. And that creates a transition right there. You press play, and it does a wipe. If you make it longer, it'll do it more gradually. Now one thing you may have noticed here is when I added the page peel to the transition here, you'll notice the timeline turned red up here. And that deals with these items down here. You've got 3 little items here that affect your video. And you've got the first one, if it has this little icon right here, is called the Accelerated Effects plugin. This is your 32-bit color. I'm going to describe that, and this is the YUV effects here. And we'll describe that as well. Let's go to our dissolve here, and we'll look at these. On our regular dissolve, you'll notice it has all 3 of these plugins present on this cross dissolve. On the non-additive dissolve, it doesn't have any. On the morph cut, it just has 1. This first one here, Accelerated Effects, means that it is using your video card to real-time render the effects to your clip. Because when you're adding a transition here like that, it takes a toll on your system to be able to generate this graphic, to real-time process that graphic as it's playing frames back to your screen. So this, it seems to do an okay job as it's doing it, but this basically means this is not supported. This is using your CPU on your computer processor to generate this rather than the video card. The video card is going to process these effects a lot faster. If these things have been written to access the video card, they're going to process a lot faster, and you're going to have real-time playback. If you're on a slower computer here, this page peel, you're going to see it kind of strobe through it. It's going to chug, and it's going to not play back alt frame. So if you use a transition that does not have that accelerated effects tab there, that means you will likely have to. Sometimes your computer will chug and it will not play back all the frames per second, and you'll see it just chugging and kind of trying to get through it through the transition. But you can render these things if you want to render them. Now, first of all, this yellow stripe up here means that you can play back. That means that the video can play back full quality and can play back full frames without lagging based on your video card that you're using in your computer. If it's red here, that means it has to be rendered. And what it does when it renders it is it builds a brand new video clip where this has been flattened into one video clip with the effect applied to it, and then it's going to access that video clip. And the way you render it, anything red in your timeline, is you hit the return or enter key on your keyboard, the big fat return key, and it will render it. And now And now it has turned this to green, and it will play through that just fine. And there's our beautiful page peel, and it looks great. The 32-bit float point is kind of important as well. If you're going to be using anything above, I want to say 8-bit video, which is kind of consumer and prosumer level video, if you're using stuff like raw footage, this is raw footage supported here. The 32-bit color is going to will not degrade the quality of your video by rendering an effect. And you'll notice that the dissolve, a lot of these have that 32-bit float point. So this is really important if you're using almost anything above 10-bit video. If you're using 10-bit video plus something that shoots 10-bit video, ProRes 422 video, you're going to want to make sure that you don't add effects that will degrade your the quality of your footage. So unfortunately, if I use the page peel, it's going to take my video down to 8-bit video on that transition, not the full video. It'll decrease the quality, the color depth of that video file during the transition. And the YUV is working with things like graphics and working with things that are YUV color. It will not convert it to RGB when you do that, which will also take the quality down. If you're bringing YUV graphics in, it'll use the YUV. That means it will use the YUV information on the clip and not convert it to RGB, which will also change and therefore degrade the quality as well. It's very, very minimal when it does that, but just something that you got to be aware of if you aren't trying to maintain the utmost quality. These ones here with all 3 tabs are going to be the best effects to use that will not degrade the quality of your footage. All right, and you'll notice on some of these, transitions here, if you grab one of these transitions and let's grab a wipe. I'm going to put this wipe on the transition between those 2 clips there. If you select the wipe and you go up to the Effect Controls panel, it will display that wipe inside that. As long as it is selected, I like to have the playhead over it as well to see the changes that I'm making. But some of these transitions, you will have additional features in it. You'll have some things that you can do to change the attributes of that transition. For example, here you have show actual sources. It'll show the beginning and ending frame it'll show the ending frame of the previous clip and the beginning frame of the next clip. But you can show actual sources, and you can also, like here, you have the options of adding a border, and click on this, and we can click on this and start scrolling to the left or moving the mouse to the left and right to change the numbers. Then when you let go, it creates a border. So you can change that border's thickness there. So when you do a transition, it does that. I wish they had things like, some of these aren't terribly complex. I wish they had things like creating motion blur or creating like a soft gradient between the wipes. That's one of the most common things I would love in these wipes here, is to use like a soft border instead of like a hard border here. But yeah, if you make that longer there, then it won't motion blur as much. Anyway, just keep that in mind that almost any one of those that you add to your clips, you can select them, go to Effect Controls, and you'll have attributes that you can kind of experiment with and control. Ooh, look at that, reverse. See, now it's going to reverse direction. Amazing wipe. Now, the last thing that I want to cover here in talking about transitions is using handles on your footage here. Now, any amount of footage that you're going to be using here, I'm going to copy this, take it to the end of my timeline, and show you here with the edit that I've done on here. If you grab this file and you drag it out, it's going to extend the clip. It's going to trim your clip and extend it here. Let's try to drag that all the way out here, and eventually it will stop. This is where they hit stop on the record, and the clip ends here. So right here at the end of the clip, and you'll notice what happens is when I get to the end of the clip, you've got this little teeny triangle in the top right-hand corner right there. Right there, that little teeny triangle in the top right hand corner of the clip right there. That means that is the end of your clip. If you trim this backwards, it's no longer the end of the clip, and that triangle is no longer present. If you are at the end of a clip and you put the beginning of another clip on there, let's show you what happens. So I'm going to grab this second clip. I'm going to grab that handle out until it reaches the beginning of the clip, and now I have that little triangle up here, which means that is the beginning of the clip. I'm going to select the gap and delete here to put those together. Now I've got 2 triangles butted up against each other. That is the end of the clip. That is the beginning of the next clip. If I arrow down and land on that and hit Command D or Control D, it'll say insufficient media. The transition will contain repeated frames. That means it's going to be a freeze frame, basically. I hit OK. It adds that cross dissolve, and you'll see this little cross dissolve with these lines through it. Basically what that means is that when this one starts fading in, it's going to be, these are freeze frames of the following clip that it's using to do this transition. And now all of a sudden, now look at that slate here. Suddenly you'll notice that slate starts moving there. So these are freeze framed, and at the end of this one, at the end of this one, it's going to repeat freeze frames into the next video. So now the slate's moving, but this one has stopped. That can has stopped moving. So it's basically using repeat frames, because what is happening here, I'm going to trim this clip here, and we're going to butt it up against, and now I'm going to grab this one, Option arrow up, and drag it over the top. This is essentially what's happening. Is this clip here, this is my opacity line. I'm going to hold down Command and add some keyframes here. This is basically what's happening when you do a cross dissolve. One, this opacity is at 0, so it's completely transparent, and it's going to ramp to 100% opacity here. So watch this as it ramps up to from transparent to 100% opacity. It's doing a cross dissolve there. So it needs handles to be able to do that. And since this one doesn't have handles here, if I need to, and if you're at the end of your clip, or the beginning of your clip, you're not going to be able to create, you're not going to be able to use, it's not going to be able to have handles to do that dissolve. It needs handles to be able to do the dissolve, to have video signal extended off into each clip to be able to do the dissolve. So just be aware of that. If you're, even if we're trimmed down to this clip here like that, and we add, so we're at the end of this clip, and this one still has some handles leading over into this area here. So if we add a cross dissolve, now watch what happens if we have a cross dissolve here, Command D. Look at what it does. It uses, it did not center the cross dissolve. It used these handles over here to do the cross dissolve into this one, so it ends by the end of this clip here. So now as we play, nothing freeze frames, and it works out well. So just something to be aware of when you're doing transitions. But you can dig through these transitions here and see what they have, experiment with them. So that's just something to be aware with when you're using transitions. Just be aware of handles. Well, that's it for the video transitions. On the next episode, I'll go through audio transitions. If you have any questions, please post them. And thanks for watching.